then we'll get started, inshallah. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. So inshallah we get started. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين يا خاتم النبيين يا شفيع المذنبين يا أنيس الغريبين يا رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. Inshallah we'll continue today with the Umrah as we started last week, and focusing more on the spiritual aspects and what we should be gaining from it, things that we should be seeing and feeling while we're performing the Umrah. And we went through a lot of this last week and just kind of a synopsis on the physical aspect of the Umrah. Of course, you know, the first thing, like in everything else, is the intention. So making a firm intention, but also with that intention, make sure you state that if under unforeseen circumstances you are not able to perform the Umrah, then you will come out of your ihram, and that basically allows you to be able to come out of the ihram if something were to happen that prevents you from performing the Umrah without giving a kafara or a dam, which would be the sacrifice of an animal and feeding of the people within the haram, or the needy people within the haram. So, and then of course, the ihram, 2 sheets of cloth for men, unstitched. For women, their regular clothes, but no niqab and no gloves. The feet also, the top of the foot must show. So flip-flops are, the best option. That's for both men and women. We went over some of the aspects of how to wear the ihram last week. I'm not going to go over that again, just kind of reiterating major points here. Of course, ihram makes many things haram. So you have to be aware of all of these things and don't violate that. Otherwise, there is kafara, where you have to give, emancipation for violating the state of the ihram. And that changes as well. So it's very circumstantially oriented as to what the kafara is, depending on how it was violated, or how the ihram was violated. Of course, you can't kill anything. You can't. No hunting, no cutting your hair, no cutting your nails, all of these things, no contact with your spouse, as far as specific contact, and then not even proposing marriage to somebody. So all of these things become haram in the state of ihram. Okay. And then of course, performing the tawaf and the sa'i. And the tawaf, is 7 times around the Kaaba. Starting point is Hajr Aswad, the black stone, and saying Bismillah Allahu Akbar as you kiss it, whether you're kissing it physically or you're kissing it indirectly, by pointing and with either a stick or your finger, and kissing that, and then moving along. As we stated last time, the first 3 times around in the tawaf is what's called a ramal. And I went into some details as to the origins of the ramal. This is not the sunnah of Ibrahim al-Islam or any of the Prophet. This did not start until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they went for the Umrah the following year after Sulh Hudaybiyah. So after Hudaybiyah, they did this. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded them to do this to show their strength. And it is the sunnah ever since then. And this is, whether you're going for Hajj or for Umrah, this is how you perform the tawaf. And this is the moving or the running in Ramal is just for men. Women will walk normally throughout the 7 circuits, or 7 times around the Kaaba. The one thing that I forgot to mention last time, we were talking about Abu Bakr Shibli, rahmatullah, and that's the questions that he asked his student who came back from the Hajj. when he asked him about the ramal, he asked him, did you perform tawaf? And when you performed tawaf, did you do the ramal? And he said, yes. So he asked him, he said, at that time, did you feel that you were running away from everything in this world to the extent that you were completely out of this world? And he said, no. And he said, you didn't do the ramal. You know. So that is the feeling that you should be having when you're doing the ramal, is that you are, you know, leaving the world behind. You know, and when you leave the world behind, what does that mean? That means you're moving towards your Lord. And we'll talk about this again when we talk about the say as well. But this gets to that hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he said, where hadith of Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when my slave comes walking to me, I go running towards him. Of course, you know, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, these are metaphorical terms. And this is how we have to understand it. And unfortunately, you know, 200 years ago, we wouldn't have to be having this discussion, but now we do. Where, you know, there's so many terms that are used metaphorically for Allah, you cannot take them literally. There is no coming or going or up and down or right or left for Allah. Allah is, period. So we should be running towards our Lord. And so this is the mindset that you should have when you're doing the ramal. Is, you know, because this dunya is that veil between us and Allah. And so you are pushing that veil aside. You know, just like when we make salat. What is the significance of raising of the hands? This is what we're doing. We're taking that veil that is in front of us, that is not allowing us to see our Lord, and we are removing that veil. And now we are standing before Allah with nothing in between. This is the significance of the raising, and this is how we should feel when we are making salat. And of course, we know our own condition. You know, we're making salat and we're thinking about everything other than what we should be focused on. Same thing when we go for the Hajj or the Umrah. You know, we should not be amongst those folks, which is the majority of people, who are thinking about everything else they should be doing other than the Umrah. You know, this is one of the diseases that we have, is that, you know, we become so focused on everything else, we forget what we're doing at the moment. And of course, this is why also, you know, everybody needs medications these days. Can't focus. But focus is something that can also be learned. And part of focus is not to worry about all of these things that you shouldn't be worrying about. You know, you need to be focused on what you're doing at that moment. And so when you're focused on that, then everything else goes away. When shaitan starts bringing things back in, the way not to think about those things is simply focus harder on what you're supposed to be focused on. You know, instead of thinking, oh, I shouldn't be thinking about that. Well, don't be thinking you're not supposed to be thinking about that, because if you're thinking you're not supposed to be thinking about that, you're thinking about that. Okay, so again, this is part of what we mentioned last week, is you will see many people there doing many things that are inappropriate. And you will also see many people there who will be stopping people from doing things that are appropriate. Okay. But you can't focus on that. You got to focus on what you're doing. And at the same time, when they're stopping you from doing what you're supposed to be doing, you've got to simply ignore that and move on. You know, you can't start dwelling on that. You know, when we look at the leadership there, you know, this is their state religion, which is everything is bidat, shirk, or haram. Okay. Even the sunnah is bidat, shirk, and haram. Things that are established in the sunnahs, things that have been established by the Muslims for 1400 years, are suddenly now bidat, shirk, and haram. Okay. But this isn't the only time. I mean, we have to remember, you know, not long after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, when Banu Umayyah comes to power, you know, you have people like Marwan bin Hakam, governor of Medina, who can't open his mouth without cursing Ali radiallahu anhu. Part of the Jummah khutbah is cursing Ali radiallahu anhu. This is happening in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. And within that city you have Imam Hassan, you have Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But they remained focused on what they were supposed to be doing. You know, the same person changing the way the Eid khutbah is given. Because people wouldn't stick around to listen to his Eid khutbah after Salat, so he changes it just to making it before Salat. And then when he's questioned on this, you know, he said that the sunnah of Rasulullah is to make it after the Salat. Oh, that's the old way, this is the better way. So, this is nothing new. So a lot of people pretend like, oh, this is a new thing when you have these bad rulers over us. No, this is nothing new. This is all a test, as well as a punishment for ourselves. So again, focus. So this is why we're going over this, you know, last week and today, is to keep that focus as to what should I be thinking, what should I be doing, and while I'm doing what I'm doing, where should my heart be, and what should I be thinking, and what should I be seeing? You know, these days, you know, people put on those goggles, you know, to play those video games, and it's like, oh, they're immersed in it, right? Well, when you go there, you shouldn't need those goggles. You should be immersed in what you're supposed to be doing. You know, you should be immersed in where you are. And this is how we have to approach things. So after Tawaf, of course, 2 rakat Maqam Ibrahim, which, you know, depending on how many people are there, can be made anywhere in the masjid. You know, if you have the opportunity, then yes, you know, make it behind where that is, that position, you know, on the side of the door of the Kaaba. But, you know, if not, anywhere in the masjid. And then, of course, drinking Zamzam. And drinking Zamzam, you know, Zamzam is not like any other water. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that Zamzam is not only water, but it is also food. And there are various narrations of various companions who, for 30 days, did nothing but drink Zamzam. And instead of becoming weaker, they actually gained weight. So, you know, and Zamzam also distinguishes between, is one of those things that distinguishes between hypocrites and believers. Because hypocrites, Rasulullah said, cannot drink much, where the believers drink a lot. And Zamzam, you know, unlike other water, you know, the command is sit when you drink slowly, you know, 3 sips, you know, take your time. With Zamzam, drink it standing, facing the Kaaba, reciting salawat, and drink it very fast. You know, gulp it down. When Rasulullah went, there are narrations where he drew the water himself. There are other narrations where other companions drew the water. These are 2 different times. Okay, so a lot of people say, well, you know, they get confused. Well, it's not confusing. You know, some companions are narrating what they saw when oh, okay. Okay. So some companions are narrating what they saw at one time, and other companions are narrating what they saw at another time. Same trip, you know. And when he took the bucket, you know, of course, you know, at that time it was still a well, so he pulled it up with the bucket. And when he took, and there was a path where you could actually go down into it, but here he's drawing it with the bucket. And he takes the bucket and he drinks the whole bucket of Zamzam, without stopping. And then he makes the statement that this distinguishes us between the hypocrites. Zamzam also is cure. For tawaf, you have to have wudu. Of course, making 2 rakat maqam Ibrahim, you have to have wudu. Okay. So for the tawaf, you have to have wudu. You have to have wudu for maqam Ibrahim. Of course, if you're drinking Zamzam right after maqam Ibrahim, making 2 rakat, you should have wudu when you're drinking Zamzam. You don't have to have wudu when you're drinking Zamzam, but yeah. You don't have to have wudu when you're making say between Safa and Marwa. Okay? So after the drinking of the Zamzam, then a lot of people will tell you that Zamzam is the greatest water on earth, which is true with conditions. It is the greatest water that we see. It is not the greatest water that has been on the earth. The greatest water that has been on the earth is the water that came from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by which 1,400 companions of his made wudu. So there is no comparison between Zamzam and that water. So we need to be clear about that. And that should be a no-brainer, but still. So after the Zamzam, then you go and make the say between Safa and Marwa. And as we mentioned, recite the verse 158 of Surah Baqarah when you ascend Safa, saying, and then you have takbir, and then you say the dua, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, La ilaha illallah wahdah, anjaza wa'ada wa nasara abda wa hazama al-ahzaba wahdah. And then make dua, for yourself, for your family, for the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then again repeat the same thing. So 3 times, takbir, and then the dua, and then after that, then you go, and in between there, you start off walking, and then there's that point where they have 2 green lights now. It means you run there. Running there is not a sprint. Okay, so you're not racing. It's moving fast. Women also, but they'll tell you women, don't run. But women should move quickly, but in a dignified manner. And again, you're not racing and running that you're going to be running over anybody. So depending on how much rush there is, also would change your speed. But again, even if there's nobody there, it's not like a 100-yard dash. This is the spot where that was low. So when Bibi Hajara, salamullah alayha, when she had left Ismail al-Islam next to the foundation of the Kaaba, and she's going looking for somebody, at this point she could no longer see him. This is why she moved quickly through this point. So then once she'd get to the other point, she could now see him again, and now she'd slow down and start walking normally. Okay. So you get to Marwa, same thing, you make the dua, and then you come back, same way. So Safa to Marwa is 1, coming back is 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and you end with Marwa. So these are, and then after that, of course, the shaving or the cutting of the hair, and that is the Umrah. That's it. Okay. When Abu Bakr Shibli, rahmatullahi, when he's asking his student, and we went over the Ramal, which I forgot to mention last week, but we went over the history of the Ramal last week. When he talks about Safa and Marwa, he asked him, he says, did you ascend Safa? And he said, yes. And did you at that time, when you made the takbir, did you hear the angels responding or making takbir with you? And he said, no. And he said, you didn't make the takbir. Okay. And he says, as you descended Safa, did you feel all the weakness and all of the impurities being removed from you? And he said, no. And he said, you didn't, descend from Safa. And he asked about the running between Safa and Marwa. And he says, when you did that, did you feel as if you had left everything and you had come to your Lord? You are running to your Lord. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Run towards Allah. So this is what he's asking. He said, did you feel that? And he said, no. He said, then you did not. You didn't run. And then in the end he says, as far as the aspects that are related to the Umrah, everything else becomes related, this conversation becomes related to the Hajj. He says, did you, when you, at the end, when you ascended Marwa, did you feel this calmness, this peace and serenity come upon you? And he said, no. And he said, yeah, then you didn't. You didn't. And for the believer, of course, when we think about this historically, we can't imagine the peace and serenity that she felt, Bibi Hajra Salamullah alayha felt, when she sees that water gushing forth from the heels of Ismail alayhi salam. Knowing that her dua has been accepted. Right? Because Ismail alayhi salam is there, and she hears that voice telling her that this has been accepted, and and so at that place where his heels were rubbing, Jibreel alayhi salam strikes the earth, and you get the gushing of Zamzam. Of course, when she comes back, then she's concerned that now this water's not stopping, and so that's why she says Zamzam, meaning stop. In her language, this was stop. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that if she had not said that, then this water would be flowing in the house of every believer throughout the world. So then she puts the boundaries, and it stopped right there. So this is of course the shaving of the head. For those people, 3 du'as. For the one who cuts it, you can't just cut a little bit, you got to cut it all the way around. 1 dua. For the women, there is no shaving, there's only cutting of the fingertip at the bottom. And then that's it. And that's the Umrah. Any questions about what I've mentioned so far today and what we talked about last week?
During Ramadan, is there an excuse for those who are medically ill or cannot?
Yeah. So again, the question is for Ramal, is there an excuse for someone who can't, physically do that? And yes. So even and we see this even during the time of the companions and during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where you had companions who would pick up their parents and make the tawaf, with their parents on their backs, and so one of the Sahabi who had carried his mother, not just during tawaf. He carried her, if I remember correctly, from a far distance, I think from Yemen, all the way to the Hajj. Did all of the rites of the Hajj with her on his back. Tawaf, say everything. And he asked Rasulullah, have I fulfilled the rights of my mother? Rasulullah SAW says that you haven't fulfilled the rights of even one night that she bore you. So, people that, that have physical ailments, that can't do that, and yes, all of those things are excused. It's interesting when we look at the Hajj itself. Every aspect of the Hajj. So, every aspect of the Hajj, there is a price on it. So if you miss, if you miss part of Mina, if you miss this, if you miss that, if you violate the rights of the ihram, if you miss being in Muzdalfa, if you do this, everything has a price on it, with the exception of one thing, and that is Arafat, standing in Arafat on the 9th of Zil-Hajj, standing in Arafat, before the sun sets on the 9th of Zil-Hajj. That is priceless. There is no price, and if you miss that, as far as Hajj, you have to come back the next year to do your Hajj, because you did not do the Hajj. So, same thing with the Umrah. Of course, there is no Arafah in Umrah. Umrah, everything has a price. And also, for physical ailments, there are conditions and exceptions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden anybody with something that he cannot bear. Any other questions?
Yeah. So after drinking water, Zamzam,
yes.
if you feel urination, immediately during the Sa'i.
Yeah, so let's say, the question is, let's say, you drink Zamzam and you got to go to the bathroom. If along the way, you have to, let's say I'm doing tawaf, right? And my wudu breaks, or I got to go. So I go, relieve myself, make wudu, come back, and restart from where I left. Okay? So there's nothing, there are certain things you have no control over. Yeah, so again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden us with those things. So same thing with, so if I drink Zamzam, and now, okay, I gotta go, and of course preferably make wudu, then come back, and do the same, yes. So it's not like, these are not things that have to be done, immediately like this. If there is an excuse that you got to go, then you go.
And if you feel during the Sa'i?
Same thing. So if you feel during the Sa'i, oh, I got to go, again, leave, go, take care of things, come back, and then pick up where you left off. So either way, and that does happen. So that's a natural aspect of things. One advice I would give, though, is that there are bathrooms that they have made, and these, when you leave, go out from the Marwa side, it's a little distance off, and there's some bathrooms, and I would not use those bathrooms, because those bathrooms are built where the house of Rasulullah SAW was when he lived with Bibi Khadija. Salamullah alayha. So yeah, I wouldn't use those bathrooms. So try to use. There are other bathrooms. So you have to be careful with that. And you have to be careful. Like even and we'll mention these things since it came up right now. I'll go ahead and mention part of it. When you're sleeping there in the hotel, make sure your feet are not where they should not be. So, you know, you will find hotels where the bed is in a position where if you're laying in the bed the way the bed is set up, yeah, your feet are in the wrong direction, in a very inappropriate direction.
So how will you check?
You know, like when you go into the hotel room, so the question is, how do you know? When you go into the hotel rooms, it will tell you what direction the Qibla is in. They usually have a thing in the hotel room that tells you what the Qibla direction is. So just make sure your feet are not towards the Qibla.
Sure.
Yeah. Or towards the masjid, which in Makkah it would be towards the Qibla. If it's toward the masjid, it's toward the Qibla.
In case of Medina,
in Medina Munawwara, the same thing. And I'll give you a personal example. When I went in 2003, we were in the hotels that were in front of the masjid on the side of Uhud. So you have half of the rooms in that hotel, the beds were set up where your feet would be towards the masjid, which was also towards the Qibla, because we were on the back side. So it would be towards the Qibla, and from where the hotel was, your feet were towards the masjid of Rasulullah as well. So we simply turned the bed around, and that's how we slept. But the problem is most people that are going to go in there, they don't even think about that.
yes.
Okay. So half the beds were that direction, and the other half the beds were in the right direction. Depending on what room you got, the room I got was the wrong direction, so we flipped the bed and did it that way. So just again, these are things that you shouldn't have to think about, but unfortunately you have to think about.
Yes.
And of course, there are people who say, "Oh, that's just nonsense." And it's funny, if you sit pointing your feet towards them, they get very upset. But they have no problems pointing their feet toward the Kaaba or the Qibla or towards Rasulullah or any of this. No adab. And the essence of Islam is adab. So, because there is no love without adab. So just be aware of that. And the hadiths are very clear, even to the extent that Rasulullah ﷺ forbade the companions from spitting towards the Qibla. Mohsin. Yeah, also, you may have to pay attention to the restrooms as well. Okay, what direction is the toilet pointing? Again, things you shouldn't have to think about, but you have to think about. So you may have to use the restroom in a different way. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So two questions. One was the bathroom, which we just addressed. So just be aware of, if the toilet is pointing towards the Qibla, that you may have to use it a little differently. The other thing there is the other question that came up with Safa Marwa. The dua is 3 times. Yeah. So 3 times, not 4. Okay. And the recitation of the verse 158 is only at the beginning. So that's 1 at the beginning, and that's it. But the dua is 3 times at each movement or each position. Okay. Any other questions? I want to cover some of the kind of ziyarat aspect of things or visitation aspect of things. In Makkah, everybody talks about Jabal Nur, which is Ghar Hira. So this, of course, the mountain of light, Jabal Nur, and on top of that mountain is the cave of Hira. And of course, we should all know the significance of this, and this is where Rasulullah spent 5 years in itikaf. I mean, this literally is what it was. It was itikaf for 5 years. And then at the end of those 5 years starts the revelation. there, he did not stop going there. He continued to go there even afterwards. So a lot of people, a lot of us in our minds, we have this concept of, he came, Revelation comes and now he's no longer going to Hira. No, he continued to go to Hira, even afterwards. So that is, of course, if you can, that is, very special place to go. The other place, of course, everybody talks about is Ghar Thawr. So, and it's interesting, Ghar Thawr is not very far from the Kaaba. So this is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, along with Abu Bakr, stayed for 3 days, while Quraysh are looking or searching for them to basically execute them when they made the hijrah. So that's another special place to go. And the history, I won't get into the history of these places a lot, but again, this is another, as we talked about last week, when we look at that verse, inna safa wal marwata min sha'air Allah, that Safa and Marwa are the signs of Allah. Verily, Safa and Marwa are the signs of Allah. But that verse comes as part of the verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala previous to this says, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لَمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. That do not say that those who are slain in the way of Allah, that they are dead, but they are alive and you don't perceive it. Okay. And the reason that this verse comes along with this verse is, or a part of this group of verses is, that even the places that the beloveds of Allah walked, even the places that those that Allah loves walks, are alive. And so the places of Rasulullah sallallahu are alive. It's the matter of our perception. And so these again are places where he, of course, all of Makkah, all of Medina are alive because he walked there, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there are some places that, of course, just like, you can make dua anywhere. But when people are going for Hajj or for Umrah, everybody says, oh, please make dua for me there. Well, Allah is here as well. I mean, in that sense. Allah hears me here just as He hears me there. But again, the place makes the distinction. So the same thing here. There are places that are distinguished over other places. And so when you are at these places, again, make dua for yourself, for your family, for the whole ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are various masajid in Makkah, many of which have been taken down. Unfortunately, 90% of the historical Islamic places have been destroyed, which is interesting because the same people that are destroying them are preserving places of their relatives, preserving or rebuilding Khaybar and all of these things. All right. So, but there are still places, and this was one of the, the Ottomans had their issues, but amongst the good that they did was that they preserved these places. And if they would find out, oh, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this here, they would put up a masjid. So there are many masajid like that, both in Makkah and Medina, where, okay, they might not be being used, but they serve as a landmark for something that significant that happened, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So again, these are places that are things where significant things happened connected to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we'll get more into this when we talk about Medina Munawwara. Another place that gets overlooked is Jannatul Mawla. So Jannatul Mawla is in Makkah like Jannatul Baqi is in Medina Munawwara. So Jannatul Mawla is the graveyard in Makkah where you have many people that were buried, but two distinguished people that stand out above all of the rest are the wife of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the mother of Bibi Fatima Salamullah alayha, the grandmother of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein Salam, Bibi Khadijah al-Kubra radiallahu anha. She is buried there. Another distinguished person who's buried there is the uncle of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Hazrat Abu Talib radiallahu anhu. He is also buried there. So, if you are able, then go. And while you're there, make dua for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them high places. So, you give them gifts, with recitation, and you make dua for us, inshallah. Now, one thing here to understand, again, getting back to that concept, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears everyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears everyone, every place, any place, right? But there are places where He's more likely to respond favorably. There are certain conditions where He's more likely to respond favorably.
Just like the example of Bibi Maryam.
Exactly. So here, the example here is of that of Bibi Maryam, Salamullah alayha. So if you know the story, Zakaria al-Islam is given charge of her, to take care of her. He, of course, is her maternal uncle. And he would, take her to this high place and close her in a room and leave her there all day to worship Allah. And he would do this, and he would close it so that no one could bother her, and she would be safe. And what happens, of course, is one day he forgets to open her, to bring her out. And this forgetting is not a normal forgetting. You have to understand that. Because he didn't just forget like overnight. He forgot for 3 days. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted him to forget. And when he remembers, he goes rushing there. Opens the door. And when he opens the door, he sees her eating fruit. But not just any fruit. He sees her eating fruit that's out of season. So there's no way anybody could have brought her this fruit. And he asks her, he says, where did this come from? And she says, from my Lord. He had been making dua for years. You have to understand, he's a very old man at this point. He's been making dua for years for a son, for a righteous son. And he still doesn't have a son. But at that moment, he makes the dua again. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to his dua by giving him Yahya alayhi salam. Why? Because he sees the mercy of Allah descending. So this is the time and the place to make this dua. It's interesting. In this situation, this teaches us many things. One is, of course, there are places and times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond to our dua. But those places and times are connected to the ones that He loves. But the other interesting thing here is Zakaria al-Islam is a prophet. He is a prophet. No matter how great Maryam al-Islam is, she is not a prophet. She is the friend of Allah, but she is not a prophet. Yet Zakaria al-Islam benefits from her, even though her status is below his status. So this is where we see someone of a higher status benefiting from someone of a lower status. Of course, when we're going there, these are people who are very much higher than us, infinitely higher than us. So this is why, we honor them and we make dua for ourselves and for the ummah of Rasulullah. So, we cannot forget the ummah, we cannot forget the condition that the ummah is in. So these, as far as in Mecca, while you're there, make as much tawaf as you can. You don't have to do all of the rites of the Umrah. You can just be making tawaf. So every 7 circuits, you made 1 tawaf, you do 2 rakat maqam Ibrahim, and drink Zamzam, and then you can go again. All right. But again, when you're doing the tawaf, understand what you're doing, where you are, why you're here. This is not just 4 walls. And this isn't just like, the house of Allah, like we think. Every house is His house. This is literally the pulpit of Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for Him to start His preaching. And we cannot forget that connection with everything there, and so directly or indirectly connected to Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, when you're in Medina Munawwara, of course, the main thing there is the Rawda of Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the presence. And here again, we are, I'm using the terms the presence of Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we understand from the standpoint of Hazir and Nadir that He is present and seeing. But again, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is present and seeing, but you go to the Kaaba and it changes everything. So the same thing when we go to the Rawda of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it should change everything. When we are and here, when you get there, you will be given a book, because they'll ask you what language you speak. They will hand you some books. If you're going on the Umrah visa, if you're going on a tourist visa, you may not get that. But if you go on the Umrah visa and they know this is why you've come, or if they see you in Ihram, they'll ask you, okay, what language, and they'll hand you some books. Okay. And one of those books will say that, that when you come to Medina, or when you go to Medina Munawwara, you need to go with the intention of visiting the masjid. If you go with the intention of visiting the Rawda of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have committed shirk. And then they will quote the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said that it's only permissible to visit 3 masajid. Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Nabawi in Medina Munawwara, and Masjid al-Aqsa, to travel to visit a masjid. Okay. Of course, they take that hadith totally out of context, and here it's even out of context, even more out of context than what they take it out of, what they normally do. Because here, Rasulullah is talking about visiting masajid. He's not talking about visiting somebody or visiting somebody's grave. Okay. And nobody goes to Medina, or no Muslim goes to Medina other than with the intention of visiting a Rasulullah. That's why you go. You think about this. Because they also mentioned the hadith where Rasulullah said that, if you make salat in Masjid al-Haram, it's as if you get this reward of 100,000 salat. And if you make it in Masjid Rasulullah 50,000. And if you make it in Masjid al-Aqsa, 25,000. So they take that one hadith, and you need to spend more time in Mecca. Well, do you understand that better, or did the companions of Rasulullah understand that better? if that was the case, then why didn't, after Fatih Makkah, why didn't those who had come from Makkah stay in Makkah? All of them went back with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they understand that his presence is more significant than anything else. So, of course, they used to, and of course they keep changing this. There was a time when you had to have the app in order to be able to go and say salam at the Rawdah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What I heard last was that they've changed that you have to have time to go and make salat in Riyadul Jannah. And we'll get to that in a second, what Riyadul Jannah is. But they may change it, so I don't know. In 2003, they did it where, okay, none of the women could go and visit the Rawdah. And so, they keep changing it. So I don't know, when you go, who knows what will be going on. But when you go and visit him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you go, you'll be walking, there'll be, people moving with you, and you come to the first window where there's a hole in this golden lattice, and there's one by itself, which is, surrounded by a bigger, I guess, outline. That is you're standing in front of the Rawdah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, pause there, say salam, make dua again, for yourself, for the ummah, for your family, for us, and if if conditions permit, then somebody needs to mute theirs. Mute the phone. Somebody needs to mute their phone.
The organizer has ended this meeting. Goodbye.
I don't know what happened. Okay, I'm back on. What happened? Okay, so we're back on, inshallah. Yeah, so, needing what? I don't know. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Someone is on the phone. Can they hear me? Okay, so if everybody would mute it. Okay, good. So, when you come to that point, again, salam, and of course salam, with adab. If you can, you will see people there with their shoes, and stuff. So again, these are distractions. You shouldn't be one of those folks. And there are people who have enough adab, they don't even wear shoes in Medina. If you look at like Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayhi, he never walked in the middle of any path in Medina. He always walked, and he never walked with his shoes. He always walked on the side. And when he was asked why, he said, because this is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood, or walked, and I don't want to be the disrespectful person who walked over his prince. I mean, these are kind of forms of adab. Imam Malik also had some very expensive horses. He never rode a horse inside of the city. Again, these are just expressions of love. Imam Shafi rahmatullahi alayhi never used a bathroom in Medina Munawwara. He always used to go out of the city to go and use the bathroom. Of course, not everybody can do that, but also when somebody is doing certain things out of expressions of love, we shouldn't be saying, "Oh, why are you doing this?" Different people understand different, levels of expression of love. So when you say salam, again, adab, salam, there will be guards who are trying to force you to, and depending on the circumstances, if you, stay as long as you can. But, again, the same thing, don't be pushing or shoving or anything like that either. And if the crowd is such that you got to keep moving, then keep moving. Okay. The next hole in the lattice is in front of the grave of Abu Bakr. So when you come here, then you say, Assalamu alayka ya Khalifatul Rasul, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the next one is Sayyidina Umar Farooq, and then you say, Assalamu alayka ya Amirul Mu'mineen. And then, give salam. Again, these are auspicious places, make dua, and then move on. If you can, try to come as much as you can. Outside of the masjid, actually, when you leave the road and you come out that door, if you keep looking straight, this is where Jannatul Baqi is. And they have certain hours that they'll open it. So within Jannatul Baqi, you have the graves of the Fatima Salamullah alayha, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. You have the graves of thousands of companions of Rasulullah, including Uthman radiallahu anhu, and so many, just many others. There are some people who do secretly have maps that tell you who's buried where. Of course, the authorities try to give you trouble over this, but those do exist. It's kind of interesting. When I was there in 2003, there was a group of men who I think were from Turkey, and they were walking around. Very old scholar was with them. So because the bulldozing of Jannatul Baqi didn't occur until after 1924. So you had still, in the early 2000s, you still had people from the old schools who knew what was where. And so he was walking around telling his men, so-and-so is here, so-and-so is there, so-and-so is there. So I just kind of followed behind them because, because I didn't understand the language, but I understood the names. And that's all I needed to understand. So Jannatul Baqi is one of those places that you want to definitely go visit. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would come there often. In fact, the hadith, which is in Sahih Bukhari, where Aisha radiallahu anha, the 15th night of Shaban, that she wakes up and she sees he's not in his bed, so she starts looking for him. Where does she find him? In Jannatul Baqi. That is where he was that night. Because I've heard people say, "Oh, you shouldn't go to the graveyards at night." It's not true. And this is all the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he would visit his friends there, those who had already passed, and he would also often visit the martyrs of Uhud at Uhud. We'll mention that now. Also another place that you want to visit is Uhud. And so there at Uhud, you have 70 of the martyrs of Uhud, and of course the leader of the martyrs, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Amir Hamza, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyid Hamza, Amir Hamza radiallahu anhu is there, and so that's definitely a place you want to visit. There are various other masajid that you want to visit. Of course, number one would be Masjid Quba. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam makes hijrah from Mecca to Medina, before entering Medina, he stops at Quba, which is on the outskirts of Medina, and he arrives in Quba on Monday, the 8th of Rabiul Awwal, and he stays there for a few days. He stays there for a few days, and while he's there, he lays the foundation for this Masjid Quba. Okay. And he says, say hadith, where he states that whoever travels to Masjid Quba and makes 2 rakat in Masjid Quba, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards him as if he has made Umrah. So this is another way of making another Umrah. Is when you come to Medina Munawwara, go and visit Masjid Quba and make 2 rakat there. Okay. And as far as the women going to Jannatul Baqi, I don't know what the authorities will allow. I don't think they allow women to go anymore. Of course, in the hadith, again, which I mentioned in Bukhari, Bibi Aisha Siddiqa is going to Jannatul Baqi. Masjid Quba, of course, everybody should be able to go. Another place to visit is Masjid Qiblatain. So Masjid Qiblatain, which means the Masjid of 2 Qiblas. So this is the place where 2nd year of Hijri, Dhuhr Salat, 2nd Rakat, Rasulullah sallallahu Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلَّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. That we see your sight, or your traveling through the heavens, and soon we will change you to the qibla that you desire, and then immediately go ahead and change to Masjid al-Haram. And so this occurred in the salat, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is leading the salat, and as he's leading the salat, he turns, because it's a 180-degree turn. There's the masjid was Masjid al-Aqsa, was the qibla, and so it's a 180-degree turn from there to the Kaaba. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the middle of his salat, he turns, and there were 10 companions who immediately turned with him, without any hesitation. And those 10 become Ashar Mubashara. Because after finishing the salat, this is when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam takes their names and say that they are from Jannah. So Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Abdul Rahman bin Auf, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqas, Talha bin Ubaidullah, Zubair bin Awam, and Sayyid bin Zaid, radiallahu anhum. So these 10. An interesting thing about these 10, with the exception of Umar, all of them accepted Islam within the first 3 years of the mission, when you had the secret propagation. Umar is the only exception. He accepted Islam in the 5th year of the mission. Yeah. So again, this is another place to visit, because again, even the places they walk are alive. And these are places where these significant things happened. So these are places, again, where you see the mercy of Allah. And even like in Jannatul Baqi, you have all of these, you have so many members of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being buried there. And again, so you need, these are places that you need to make dua, for yourself, for your family, and for all of us, for the whole ummah, and especially in these days and times, with everything that's going on. there are many, many other places there, and you start going through the list. But these kind of are the major places that come to mind right now. And of course, even after you leave, you say, "Oh, I wish I'd visited that. I wish I'd visited that." There is an orchard, date orchard there also, which is the same place where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam planted those 300 trees, where in order to free Salman Farsi, radiallahu anhu. So even though those trees either died or were cut down, you still have the offsprings of those trees there. So that would be another place if you can go. Any questions? Good. I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot, I know. But these, I think, are the highlights of what I can think of at this point.
What is the best time to visit all the Qadr stay longer?
Yeah, he's asking what's the best time to visit, so that you can stay longer. Probably kind of like Ishraq time. Usually what happens with a lot of, and I'll come to a second. I'm going to, after this, I just remembered, your question reminded me of Riyadul Jannah. So, a lot of it's going to kind of have to see the situation when you're there. But usually a lot of folks will, like, after they make salat, they will go and they'll give salat. So right then, you're going to have kind of a bigger crowd coming through in general. So sometimes in between, you may not have as big of a crowd. Yeah. Because a lot of people are either, they'll come give salams, and while they're there, okay, make the salat, or make salat and then go give salam. So if you come like in between a salat, like, between Fajr and Dhuhr, or between Dhuhr and Asr, because these times, especially between Dhuhr and Asr, you may not have as many people out. So that might be the better time, but you have to kind of see what's going on when you're there. And again, part of that also may be they might, they may reinstitute, you gotta sign in and have a schedule and come. So they might do that again too, so it just depends.
They are not allowing women?
No, well, they are now, but the women have separate times. So there are timings for the women. Again, rules will change depending on whatever mindset they're in at the moment. So 2003, when I went for Hajj, they did not allow women. And my wife was with me, so she was not able to go. So what I did was I took her to Babi Jibril, which is that door, because if you stand at the right angle, you can see the Rawda from there. So I took her there, and she was, to let her see in. And this guy came running up to us. Haram, you gotta leave, And even like 100 yards away, just looking at it, haram. This shows you the animosity that they have against him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They don't even want people to look. So, Riyadul Jannah. Riyadul Jannah is that piece of the Masjid of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is between his house, which was the house of Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, which is where he is buried, and his mimbar. So where he gave the khutbah from. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that this is a part of Jannah, which should not be very hard to understand, because anything connected to him is Jannah. He is the essence and the heart and the soul of Jannah. And so anything that's going to be connected to him is Jannah. So if you can, make salat there. There are various pillars there. And those pillars, again, this is one of those things that the Ottomans did, that, where Rasulullah used to stand and meet, delegations that would come. They put a pillar there. Where Abu Lubaba tied himself to a pillar there, they put another pillar there. Where, certain things happened, they put pillars there. So be aware of that. Again, if you can, try to make salat, at the minbar. And when Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahmatullahi alayhi, what he did, which is, we see his foresightedness, when he rebuilt or kind of solidified the minbar, or the mihrab, not the minbar, but the mihrab of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He made it where now when you make salat, your head goes where the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were. This again, because Umar bin Abdul Aziz understood adab. This is why he's Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So he made it so that, no one stands where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood, but your head goes where his sallallahu alaihi wasallam's blessed feet were. So if you get an opportunity, try to make salat there. You may not be able to, but again, kind of depends on what the rules are at the time. What they also did, actually, in '91 when I went, we were there. I was there with my older brother, and we were, kind of leaving the area, and we got pushed from behind. Because the religious police are kind of forcing everybody out. Get out. And so my brother starts to fall, and he catches himself with his hand on the mihrab. And there was a religious police standing there, and he hits his hand and says, haram. Okay. So again, be aware of that. This goes totally against the sunnah of Rasulullah, totally against the understanding of the companions of Rasulullah. The hadiths are very, very clear that Umar bin Khattab, Abdullah ibn Umar, who is the son of Umar bin Khattab, he is a companion of Rasulullah. He is the son of Sahabi. He himself is Sahabi. He is considered a faqih amongst the companions of Rasulullah. He would go to the minbar of Rasulullah, and where Rasulullah used to sit, he would rub that place with his hand and kiss his hands and rub those hands on his face. This is adab. And yet, you'll have people, these so-called religious police running around saying, oh, you can't touch this, you can't do this. If somebody comes there, with a sheet, because there are people who will go there with their coffin, with their shroud, with the intention of, if they die there, that becomes their coffin. But if they don't, they'll touch it to certain places because, oh, this has been touched by, this is all nisbah. This is all that connection. And they'll be told, oh, haram, shirk, bidat. When in reality, this is the sunnah. So Riyadul Jannah, of course, while you're there, and again, there might be restrictions on when you can go there, but whenever you can, then make 2 rakat. And if you can, at that point there at the mihrab, make the salat there. And it was Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahmatullahi alayhi, who solidified and covered many of the graves in Jannat al-Baqi, as well as the grave of Imam Hussein al-Islam in Karbala. And of course, later on, you had these kings and stuff come and destroy stuff. And now these kings, recent kings, who've destroyed everything. But can't. I know I'm missing stuff. But anybody think of anything I'm missing? اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك سيدنا عليه. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا مولانا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى آله وصحبه دائما أبدا. صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. صلى الله عليه وسلم. One of the diseases of today that is there, of course, is all these selfies and all this other stuff. Yes, okay. So, another place within the masjid of Rasulullah is the suf. This is that platform where the ashab suf used to sit. And they would sit standing, they would sit standing, sit. This was in front of the house of Rasulullah. And they would sit there and wait for Rasulullah to come out of his house so that they could learn something from him. And this was their job. This was it. These are people who did not, have a career. This was their career. So Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu is amongst them. He's probably one of the more famous amongst them. These are also people who would not, because they didn't have any money. So they wouldn't eat unless somebody offered them something to eat. They would literally go for, at times a days without eating, simply waiting for Rasulullah to say something so they could learn it. So that platform is there. So again, if you can make salat, and if you make salat there, you'll be behind the Rawda of Rasulullah. Again, it's interesting, when Rasulullah was buried, he's buried in the house of Aisha Siddiqa, because the prophets are buried where they pass. So he's buried there in her house. A lot of us think that, he was buried there and she moved someplace else, and she did not. She continued to live there. She continued to make salat in that house, and it wasn't a big house. This was one room. She continues to make salat in that house. And then, 2.25 years later, her father is buried there, next to Rasulullah. And she continues to live there, continues to make salat in that house. And they are buried toward the front of the house. She was living towards the back of the house. She moved her cot, towards the back, and this is where she would sleep, and this is where she would do whatever. Okay. Then when Umar was buried there 10 years later, 10 years after Abu Bakr, then she put a curtain up there. Because he, of course, is ghair mahram for her. Before it was Rasulullah and her father, Abu Bakr. So she didn't put up any curtain. But once he's buried there, then she puts the curtain up. But she continues to live there. And again, as I keep saying, and I'm saying this specifically for a reason, she keeps making salat there as well. It's interesting, there's, Sahih Bukhari, one of the translators of Sahih Bukhari in English is this guy, Mohsin Khan. there's a whole section that he doesn't translate. And he says, oh, these hadiths are impossible to translate. The problem is that those hadiths go against his aqidah. Because his aqidah is you can't build a masjid or make salat next to a grave. And yet within those hadiths in Sahih Bukhari, you have Abdullah ibn Umar telling his servant Nafi that when you go to such and such a place, make salat there, and the way you know that that's the place is because the masjid is next to 2 or 3 graves. But it contradicts their vested beliefs that they push on everybody, and so they say, we can't translate these because they want to keep everybody ignorant. So inshallah, I'll kind of wrap things up, or I've already wrapped things up, so we'll kind of end here inshallah. Any questions? Good. The clocks are supposed to change next week, so if I'm correct, next Sunday will be the 3rd, so that's when the clocks fall back. So what we will do for next week is we'll make Dhuhr Salat first. So 1 o'clock we'll make Dhuhr Salat, Adhan and Salat, and then at 1:30 we'll start the class until 3, inshallah. So so that's what we'll make the Salat first, and then we'll do the class inshallah after that. If there are no questions. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand. May He allow us to make Umrah and Hajj that is accepted by Him. May He, fill our hearts with His love and the love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they loved. And may He, give strength and protection to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine and wherever the people are being oppressed, and give them strength over their oppressors. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.